Admiral Henry Jackson stood tall as he looked out the large window of the ship. His gray hair was cut short, and deep lines crossed his face after 6 years of war. The human ship, USS Relentless, floated in space. Ahead of them was the much larger alien ship. The Kravek ship was 3 times the size of the human vessel. Its dark metal shell looked like it was made of overlapping scales. "They're ready for the call, sir," said Officer Diane Miller. Her fingers moved quickly over the control panel. Jackson nodded. "Put them on screen." The large screen at the front of the bridge flickered to life. The face that appeared made several crew members step back. Supreme Commander Jorak of the Kravek had dark green skin with patches of small scales. His 4 yellow eyes blinked at different times. When he opened his mouth to speak, 2 rows of sharp teeth showed. "Admiral Jackson," the alien said in a voice that sounded like rocks being crushed. "Are you ready to accept the terms of your surrender?" Jackson kept his face calm. "We are here to talk about peace, Commander. Real peace. Not surrender." Next. To Jackson stood Pamela Scott, who represented Earth's United Nations. She was a tall woman with dark skin and short black hair. She stepped forward. "Our proposal offers a way for both our species to live," she said. "We can share the outer colonies. There is room for all of us in this part of space." The alien made a sound like laughter, but there was no joy in it. "Your species has been a problem since we found you. You spread too quickly. You consume too much. You do not know your place." "We have a right to exist," Jackson said. His hands formed fists at his sides, but his voice stayed steady, "just like your people do." "Rights?" Zorak moved closer to the screen. "The universe does not care about rights. It cares about power. And we have more." It was true. The Kravek had better ships, stronger weapons, and shields that human weapons could barely damage. The war had gone badly for Earth from the start. 3 human colony planets had been destroyed already. Billions of people had died. Earth itself had been attacked twice with millions more deaths. "Then why talk at all?" Scott asked. "Why not just destroy us?" "Because total war costs resources," the alien commander said. "It would be easier if you accepted your place. Surrender now, and some humans will be allowed to live. Refuse, and we will finish what we started." Jackson and Scott shared a look. They both knew what was at stake. Back on Earth, in a deep underground lab, scientists were working on something called Project Lazarus. It was a weapon unlike anything humans had built before. The scientists who created it said it should never be used, that it crossed a line no species should cross, but Earth was running out of options. "We need time to consider your terms," Jackson said carefully. The alien's top 2 eyes narrowed. "You have had 6 years to consider. Your answer is expected now." Scott stepped forward again. "What you're asking for isn't peace. It's slavery. Humans would be kept like animals. Our children would grow up in cages. That's not something we can accept." "Then you choose extinction," Zorak said simply. "We have tried to be merciful." Jackson almost laughed at that. The Kravek had killed billions of humans. They had burned whole cities from orbit. They had taken humans as test subjects for their labs. Mercy was not a word that fit them. "One more day," Jackson tried. "Give us 1 more day to discuss this with Earth's leaders." The alien commander was quiet for a long moment. "Very well. 1 rotation of your planet. Then we expect your surrender. Or we attack your homeworld with our full fleet." The screen went black. Miller turned to look at Jackson. "Sir, do you think they'll really wait?" "No," Jackson said. "They're moving their ships into position now, I bet. They just want us to waste time hoping." Scott's hands were shaking slightly. "We need to tell the Security Council. They need to know the talks have failed." Jackson nodded. "Send the message. Use the special channel. Tell them to expect an attack within 24 hours. As Scott left to send the message, Jackson stayed looking out the window at the alien ship. His mind went to the secret weapon, Project Lazarus. He had been briefed on it 3 months ago. The scientists had shown him simulations of what it could do. He had thrown up after seeing them. No choice now, he whispered to himself. The ship's captain, a man named Joe Green, came to stand beside him. "Orders, sir?" "Get us out of here," Jackson said. "Full speed back to Earth, and send this message to Earth Command, Prometheus Unchained." Green's face went pale. He knew what those words meant. "Are you sure, sir? Once that's done, there's no taking it back." Jackson thought of his home in Colorado, the mountains he used to hike, the family he had lost when the Krevek bombed Denver. "I'm sure they've left us no choice." As the human ship turned and started to move away, Jackson watched the alien vessel grow smaller in the distance. He wondered if they knew what was coming, if they could possibly understand what they had pushed humanity to do. "May God forgive us," he said quietly. In the ship's communications room, Scott finished sending the message to Earth. When she typed the words, Prometheus Unchained, at the end, she felt a cold weight in her stomach. She had argued against creating the weapon, had said there must be lines even in war that could not be crossed, but the Krevek had pushed too hard, had killed too many, had left humanity with its back against the wall. The USS Relentless increased speed, racing back toward Earth. They needed to be there when Project Lazarus was activated, needed to be ready for whatever came after. As they traveled, Jackson sat in his quarters looking at pictures of his dead wife and daughter. He touched the screen gently. "We'll make them pay," he whispered, "for all of it." But in his heart, he wondered if the price might be too high, if saving humanity might cost them their humanity. On Earth, in the deep underground lab in Nevada, Dr. Alan West received the message. His hands trembled as he read the code words. Prometheus Unchained. It was really happening. The weapon he had helped create was going to be used. "Get everyone in here," he told his assistant. "It's time." Scientists rushed into the lab. They all looked scared. They knew what they had built, knew that it broke rules of science and of morality. "Begin the activation sequence," West ordered. As they worked, West looked at the small silver ball floating in the center of the room. It didn't look dangerous, but inside it was something that could change everything. A weapon that attacked, not just bodies but time itself. A weapon aimed at the very DNA of an entire species. "God help us all," he whispered as the countdown began. Dr. Alan West had not slept in 2 days. His eyes were red and his hands shook slightly as he poured another cup of coffee. Around him, the underground lab hummed with energy. 20 of the world's best scientists worked at their stations. None of them spoke much. They all knew what was about to happen. "Status report," called Susan Boyd, the lab director. She was a tall woman, with gray hair pulled back tight. Her face showed no emotion, but West knew her well enough to see the fear in her eyes. "Quantum matrix is stable," said Dr. Kevin Martinez from his computer. "The targeting system is locked on Krevek neural patterns." West walked to the center of the room where a small silver sphere floated inside a clear chamber. The sphere was only about 8 inches across. It did not look like a weapon that could end a war. It did not look like something that could change the universe. "Final authorization received," Boyd announced. Her voice was flat. "The peace talks have failed. Earth will be attacked within 24 hours. We are to proceed with deployment." West felt his stomach tighten. For 3 years he had worked on Project Lazarus. It had started as research into quantum physics, a way to study how particles could exist in multiple places at once. Then the war had come. The Krevek had attacked Earth's colonies. Millions had died. The military had taken over his research. "Begin final checks," West said. He tried to keep his voice steady. The team moved like machines, each person doing their part. They had practiced this many times, but this was real. After today, there would be no going back. Dr. West, a young scientist named Lisa Patel, called from her station. "I'm seeing some fluctuation in the temporal field." West moved to her screen. Numbers flashed across it. "Adjust the stabilizers. We need perfect alignment." As Patel worked, West thought about what they were about to do. The Krevek were different from humans in many ways. One key difference was in their brains. All Kravik were connected by a kind of natural telepathy. It let them share thoughts across great distances. It made them dangerous enemies because they could coordinate perfectly in battle. Project Lazarus would use that connection against them. The weapon would send a signal that would attack Kravik neural patterns. But the worst part, the part that had made West sick when he first understood it, was the temporal effect. The weapon would not just affect Kravik now. It would send the effect backward and forward in time, spreading like a virus through their entire species. Field stabilized, Patel reported. All systems green, Martinez added. Boyd walked to stand beside West. We're ready, she said quietly. It's your call. West looked around the room at his team. They had been chosen not just for their brilliant minds, but for their mental strength. They all understood what they were doing. They all would have to live with it. Are we sure? West asked Boyd. Really sure? Once we do this. The Kravik fleet is moving toward Earth, Boyd said. Her voice was low, so only West could hear. Our regular weapons can't stop them. We've lost 3 colony worlds already. Billions dead. This is our last option. West nodded slowly. He knew she was right. He had seen the reports, the images of destroyed cities and dead children. The Kravik had shown no mercy. They saw humans as pests to be removed. Begin activation sequence, West ordered. The room grew even quieter as the team worked. West walked to a special console and placed his hand on the scanner. It read his fingerprints and DNA. Voice confirmation required, the computer said. Dr. Alan West. Authorization Omega-73. Boyd stepped up next to him and placed her hand on a second scanner. Dr. Susan Boyd. Authorization Delta-95. Together they turned 2 keys at the same time. On the main screen, a countdown appeared. 1 minute. This will save humanity, Boyd said softly. Remember that. West wasn't sure if she was talking, to him or to herself. At what cost? He whispered. The silver sphere began to glow with a soft blue light. The air around it seemed to bend and wave like heat rising from hot pavement. The countdown reached 10 seconds. Everyone behind the safety line, West called. The team moved back. Some held hands. One man closed his eyes and his lips moved in. Silent prayer, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The sphere pulsed once with bright light. For a brief moment, West thought he could see through walls, through people, through time itself. Then it was gone. The sphere continued to float, now looking ordinary again. Did it work? Someone asked. Martinez checked his readings. Energy pulse confirmed. Quantum delivery system activated. Now we wait, Boyd said. They didn't have to wait long. Just 20 minutes later, the first reports came in. The Kravik fleet approaching Earth had suddenly stopped. Ships were drifting out of formation. Communications between Kravik vessels had become chaotic. West watched the live feed from space on the main screen. Kravik ships moved in strange patterns. Some crashed into each other. Others fired weapons at nothing. It's working, Boyd said. Her voice held no joy. More reports flooded in. The effect was spreading faster than they had predicted. Kravik forces around Mars were breaking down. A battle near Jupiter's moons had ended as Kravik ships went silent. 4. Hours after activation, Admiral Jackson arrived at the lab. His uniform was crisp, but his face looked tired and old. The Kravik fleet is no longer a threat, he told the team. We're getting reports from all fronts. Their entire command structure is collapsing. The scientists looked at each other. No, one cheered. No one smiled. What exactly is happening to them? West asked. Jackson's face was grim. Their neural networks are breaking down. They can't communicate, can't coordinate. Some reports say they're attacking each other. We've intercepted transmissions. They're in pain, confused, afraid. West felt sick. He had known what the weapon would do in theory. Hearing the reality was different. And the temporal effect? Boyd asked quietly. We're still gathering data, Jackson said. But it appears to be working as designed. The effect is moving through their entire species, not just the warriors we're fighting now. West walked away from the group. He went to the window that looked out at the silver sphere. It seemed so small, so simple, but it had just changed everything. "This is what they forced us to do," Jackson said from behind him. "Remember that, they gave us no choice." West nodded, but he wasn't sure he believed it. Yes, the Kravek had been brutal. Yes, they had killed billions. But this weapon, it didn't just kill bodies, it reached across time to attack an entire species. "What have we become?" West whispered. No one answered him. In the silence of the lab, the silver sphere continued to pulse gently, sending its signal across space and time. Fleet Commander Carol Hayes stood on the bridge of the USS Defiant. Through the large front window, she could see the battle. Human ships fired bright beams at the Kravek vessels. The alien ships were bigger and stronger. There were more of them too. But Hayes had to keep fighting. They needed to hold for just a little longer. "Enemy ships moving toward Sector 4, said Greg Nelson, the tactical officer. His fingers moved quickly over the control panel. "They're trying to break through our line." Hayes nodded. "Tell the Princeton and the Challenger to move to support. We can't let them get past us." The battle had been going on for 3 hours. Hayes and her fleet were protecting the human colony on Proxima Centauri. It was one of the last colonies left. If it fell, Earth would be next. "Ma'am," called Peter Wu from the communications station. "Message from Earth Command. Top priority." Hayes walked over and looked at the screen. The message was short. "Prometheus unchained. Hold position." She felt her heart beat faster. She knew what those words meant. The weapon was active. The weapon, they said, would never be used. "New orders," she told her crew. "We hold this position no matter what." The next hour was hard. 3 human ships were destroyed. The Defiant took heavy damage to its right side. But they held the line. They kept the Kravek ships from reaching the colony. Then something strange happened. "Commander," Nelson called. "Look at the enemy fleet." Hayes turned to the main screen. The Kravek ships were changing formation, but not in a way that made sense. Some were turning away from the battle. Others were just sitting still. "What are they doing?" she asked. Wu touched his earpiece. "Ma'am, we're picking up strange communications from the Kravek. It's not making sense. They sound confused." The bridge crew watched in silence as more Kravek ships began to act strangely. 2 large vessels crashed into each other. Another fired weapons at empty space. Several smaller ships started to drift away from the battle. "It's working," Hayes whispered. She had been briefed on Project Lazarus 6 months ago. She knew what it was supposed to do. But seeing it happen was different. It felt unreal. "Should we attack, ma'am?" Nelson asked. His finger hovered over the weapons control. Hayes thought for a moment. The Kravek ships were now easy targets, but something felt wrong about attacking an enemy who couldn't fight back. "No," she decided. "Hold fire. Keep watching them." Over the next hour, the Kravek fleet fell apart completely. Ships stopped responding. The few that still moved did so in confused patterns. The attack on the human colony was over. "We're getting reports from other battle zones," Wu said. His voice was filled with wonder. "It's happening everywhere. All Kravek forces are breaking down." Hayes should have felt happy. This was victory. After 6 years of losing, humanity had finally found a way to stop the Kravek. But as she watched the alien ships drift helplessly, she felt cold inside. "Open a channel to the closest Kravek ship," she ordered. Wu looked surprised but did as she asked. "Channel open, ma'am. This is Fleet Commander Hayes of the Earth Defense Force. Do you need assistance?" At first there was no answer. Then a scratchy voice came through. It didn't sound like the proud, cruel Kravek commanders Hayes had heard before. This voice was weak and confused. "Help. Something wrong. Mine's breaking. Who am I?" Hayes closed the channel. She couldn't listen anymore. "Ma'am," Wu said quietly, "Earth Command wants us to move in and secure the Kravek vessels. They want prisoners and technology." Hayes nodded slowly. "Tell all ships to approach with caution. No one fires unless fired upon." As human ships moved toward the drifting Kravek vessels, Hayes went to her private office. She needed a moment alone. On her desk was a picture of her family back on Earth. Her husband and 2 children were smiling in front of their house. They were safe now. The war was essentially over. But at what cost? Hayes had joined the military to protect people. She had fought hard against the Kravek, who had shown no mercy to humans. But this was different. Project Lazarus didn't just defeat an enemy. It broke them at the most basic level. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. It was her second-in-command, Captain Richard Lowe. "Ma'am, you need to see this," he said. Hayes followed him back to the bridge. On the main screen was a live feed from inside one of the Kravek ships. Earth soldiers in spacesuits were moving through the alien vessel. The scene was shocking. Kravek crew members were wandering aimlessly. Some were curled up in corners, rocking back and forth. Others seemed to be trying to operate their equipment but couldn't remember how. "My God," Hayes whispered. "It gets worse," Lowe said. "We're getting reports from long-range scouts. The effect is spreading to Kravek home systems. Their entire civilization is collapsing." Hayes sat heavily in her command chair. This wasn't just a military victory. It was something much bigger, much darker. "Captain Wu," she said. "Send a message to Earth Command. Tell them we've secured the Proxima Centauri system. The Kravek fleet is neutralized." She couldn't bring herself to say more. What could she say? That humanity had just used a weapon that attacked an entire species across time itself? That they had won the war by breaking the minds of not just soldiers, but civilians too? Hours later, Hayes stood in the medical bay of the Defiant. On a bed lay a Kravek. It was smaller than the warriors, probably young. Its green skin was dull and its 4 eyes moved in different directions. The ship's doctor, Sarah Lewis, stood nearby. "Can you help it?" Hayes asked. Lewis shook her head. "I don't think anyone can. The weapon didn't just attack their bodies. It attacked the way their minds work, the way they think, the way they remember who they are." Hayes looked at the alien. The Kravek had been terrible enemies. They had killed billions of humans. They had shown no mercy, no interest in real peace. But looking at this confused, broken creature, Hayes couldn't feel triumph. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. "Earth. Command is sending science teams," Lewis said. "They want to study the effects, learn more about how the weapon worked." Hayes nodded and left the medical bay. As she walked back to the bridge, crew members stopped to salute her. Some tried to congratulate her on the victory. She forced herself to smile and nod, but inside she felt cold. On the bridge, she looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, a proud and ancient civilization was falling apart. Project Lazarus had done its job too well. The war was over, but Hayes wondered about the future. Would other alien races see what humanity had done? Would they fear humans? Now, what kind of galaxy would they live in after this day? "Orders, ma'am?" asked Captain Lowe. Hayes took a deep breath. "Continue securing the system. Treat any Kravek we find with medical care and respect." She paused. "And prepare a full report on what we've seen here. People need to know what this victory really looks like." As the Defiant moved through space, past drifting Kravek ships, Hayes knew that humanity had crossed a line. They had survived, but they had used a weapon that would change everything. The universe would never look at humans the same way again. 1 month after Project Lazarus was activated, Ambassador John Foster stepped off the shuttle onto the Galactic Council station. The air felt cold against his skin. Or maybe it was just his nerves. The station was a huge ring floating in neutral space. It had been built by the 17 spacefaring species that made up the Galactic Council. Humans had not been invited to join. Earth had been too new to space travel when the Kravek War began. 2 blue-skinned aliens waited for Foster. They were Meverans, known for their calm nature and skill as diplomats. "Ambassador Foster," one said in slightly accented English. "The council is waiting." Foster nodded and followed them down a long hallway. His 2 aides walked behind him. They all wore formal Earth uniforms, dark blue with silver buttons. Foster had practiced what he would say for days. But how do you explain something like Project Lazarus to other species? How do you defend the unthinkable? The council chamber was a large round room. Raised seats circled the walls, with representatives from each species sitting in their designated areas. In the center was a single platform where speakers would stand. The room had been designed to make everyone equal, but Foster didn't feel equal today. He felt like he was on trial. Humans, announced a tall, thin alien. This was High Counselor Ethnar of the Meveran Republic, the current leader of the council. You have been summoned to explain your actions. Foster stepped onto the central platform. The lights felt hot on his face. Honorable representatives of the Galactic Council, he began. I come before you today as the voice of Earth and all human colonies. You come before us to explain a weapon that has shocked the galaxy, interrupted a small furry alien from the Sarn Collective. We have detected quantum temporal disturbances across 12 star systems. Foster nodded slowly. The weapon was called Project Lazarus. It was designed as a last resort against the Kravek. Last resort? Hissed another representative. This one had scales and yellow eyes. You did not just defeat the Kravek, you destroyed them as a species. Our scientists report that their entire neural network is collapsing, not just their warriors. All of them. Foster had seen the reports. The effect had spread faster than even the creators of Project Lazarus had predicted. The weapon had attacked the telepathic connection that all Kravek shared. It had scrambled their ability to think, to remember, to know who they were. And because of the temporal effect, it spread backward and forward in time. The Kravek waged a war of extermination against us, Foster said. His voice was steady even though his heart was racing. They destroyed 3 of our colony worlds. They killed billions. They refused all attempts at peace unless we accepted complete surrender and enslavement. So you decided to destroy their entire civilization? Asked Ethnar. Not just the Kravek who fought you, but all Kravek across time? Foster took a deep breath. We acted in self-defense. The chamber erupted in angry voices. Species that normally got along well were shouting at each other. Some supported humans, saying the Kravek had been known as brutal conquerors. Others condemned Earth, saying no weapon should ever affect time itself. Ethnar raised a hand, and slowly the room grew quiet. Ambassador Foster, your weapon broke the most sacred law of space travel. No species should ever mess with the flow of time. The effects are still spreading. Our scientists can't even predict the full damage. Foster had been briefed on this. The weapon had created what scientists called quantum temporal fractures, small cracks in the fabric of reality. Most were tiny and would heal on their own. But some were growing. We did what we had to do to survive, Foster said. The Kravek left us no choice. There is always a choice, said a representative from the oldest species in the council, the Drej. They looked almost like humans, but with silver skin. Your people chose to build this weapon. You chose to use it. Foster couldn't argue with that. Earth scientists had created Project Lazarus knowing what it could do. Military leaders had approved its use knowing the consequences. The council has reached a decision, Ethnar announced. Humanity is to be quarantined to your home system until we can determine if you possess other weapons of this nature. All human ships must return to your solar system immediately. Foster had expected this. Earth military leaders had warned him it might happen. And if we refuse this quarantine? The room grew very quiet. Ethnar's blue face looked sad. Then, the council will have no choice but to consider humanity an existential threat to all sentient life. The meaning was clear. If humans didn't accept being locked in their own solar system, the other species might unite against them. After the long war with the Kravek, Earth couldn't survive another conflict. I will take your decision back to Earth's leaders, Foster said. But I ask the council to remember that we were fighting for our survival. What would any of your species have done facing extinction? No one answered him. As Foster left the platform, he felt the eyes of every alien on him. Some looked afraid, others angry. A few seemed curious, but none looked at him the same way they had before Project Lazarus. Later, in his small room on the station, Foster sat looking out at the stars. His aides were preparing the shuttle for the return journey to Earth. There was a soft knock at the yaw door. When Foster opened it, he was surprised to see a drage standing there. It was not the same one from the council. "May I come in?" the drage asked. Foster stepped aside. The silver-skinned alien entered the room and looked around curiously. "My name is Selnar," the drage said. "I am a historian." "Ambassador Foster," he replied, though the alien surely knew that already. "What can I do for you?" Selnar moved to the window and looked out at the stars. "I wanted to meet a human up close to see for myself." "See what?" Foster asked. "Whether you look like monsters," the drage said simply. "Many in the galaxy now think of humans that way. The species that broke time to win a war." Foster felt a flash of anger. The Kravek were the monsters. They killed billions of us, they showed no mercy. "And now they are broken," Selnar said. "A species that existed for 50,000 years, reduced to confused, lost individuals who cannot remember their own names." Foster had no answer for that. "The quarantine will not last forever," the drage continued. "One day humans will rejoin the wider galaxy. When that day comes, what will you be? Conquerors? Traitors? Friends?" The alien turned to look directly at Foster. "Or will you be the species that other races watch closely, always afraid of what weapon you might use next?" "We want peace," Foster said. "We always did." "Peace achieved through the threat of unimaginable weapons is not true peace," Selnar replied. "It is just fear by another name." After the drage left, Foster sat for a long time thinking about those words. Earth had survived the Kravek. Humanity would continue. But they would carry the weight of Project Lazarus forever. Other species would look at humans and wonder if they too might one day face such a weapon. When Foster returned to Earth, he found a world celebrating victory but also struggling with what they had done. Some people called the scientists who created Project Lazarus heroes who had saved humanity. Others called them monsters who had gone too far. The truth, Foster thought, was somewhere in between. They had done a terrible thing for a good reason. They had crossed a line to save their species. Now they would have to live with that choice. In his report to Earth's leaders, Foster wrote, "We are now seen as the species willing to break the fundamental rules of existence to ensure our survival. This is both our strength and our greatest weakness in the eyes of the galaxy. We are feared, but fear is not respect, and it is not friendship. We have survived the war, but we have a new challenge now, to show the galaxy that humanity is more than the weapon we unleashed." As the quarantine began, with all human ships returning to the solar system, Foster wondered what the future would hold. They had time now. Time to rebuild, to think about who they wanted to be when the galaxy finally let them out again. What kind of species would emerge from the shadow of Project Lazarus? Only time would tell. And time, as they had learned, was a dangerous thing to mess with. 5 years had passed since the end of the war. Dr. Linda Rogers walked slowly through the memorial gardens in what used to be downtown San Francisco. Before the Kravek attacked, this area had been filled with tall buildings and busy streets. Now it was a peaceful place of green grass and trees. Stone paths wound between memorials to those who had died in the war. Linda stopped in front of the newest monument. It was a tall black stone pillar that rose 20 feet into the air. Carved into its surface were names. Hundreds of names. These were not the names of those who had died in the war. These were the names of those who had worked on Project Lazarus. Linda's own name was there near the middle. "Not a very happy place to visit, is it?" said a voice behind her. Linda turned to see President Frank Morris walking toward her. He was a tall man with short gray hair. He wasn't surrounded by security guards today. He was here as a regular person, not as the leader of Earth. "No, sir," Linda replied. "But I felt I should come." Morris nodded. He looked up at the monument. "They're calling it the Monument to the Unthinkable. Some people wanted to call it the Heroes Monument. Others wanted it called the War Crime Memorial." Linda wasn't surprised. Even 5 years later, people still argued about Project Lazarus. Was it a necessary evil that had saved humanity, or had it been going too far? "What do you think it should be called?" she asked the president. Morris was quiet for a moment. "I think it should be a reminder of what we did, yes, but also of what we almost lost, and of what we need to be careful never to become." Linda nodded. She had been one of the scientists who worked on the quantum targeting system for Project Lazarus. She had helped build a weapon that had saved humanity, but had also changed them forever. "I'm speaking here today," Morris said. "Will you stay for it?" "I'm not sure I belong here," Linda replied. "You, more than most," Morris said. "The people who built Lazarus need to be part of the conversation about what comes next." Before Linda could answer, more people began to arrive. Some carried flowers to place at other memorials throughout the garden. Others came specifically for the president's speech. Soon a crowd of several hundred had gathered. Morris stepped onto a small platform in front of the black monument. He didn't use notes. He simply looked out at the crowd and began to speak. 5 years ago today, humanity faced extinction, he said. His voice carried clearly across the quiet garden. The Kravek had destroyed our colonies. They had attacked Earth itself. They had killed billions of our people, and they had rejected all attempts at real peace. The crowd was silent. Everyone remembered those dark days. "We were left with an impossible choice," Morris continued. "Accept defeat and the end of human freedom, or use a weapon that we knew crossed a moral line. We chose survival. We chose to use Project Lazarus." Linda saw some people in the crowd nod. Others looked down at the ground. "Today we remember not just our victory, but its cost," the president said. "We survived, but in doing so, we unleashed something that can never be undone. The Kravek civilization, which had existed for 50,000 years, is gone. Not just their military, all of them, their children, their artists, their historians, all broken by our weapon." A cold wind blew through the garden. Linda pulled her coat tighter around herself. "The quarantine imposed on us by the Galactic Council continues," Morris said. "We remain confined to our solar system, isolated and feared. But we have used these 5 years well. We have rebuilt our cities, we have mourned our dead, and we have thought deeply about who we want to be when we rejoin the wider galaxy." Linda knew this was true. Earth had changed since the war. People valued peace more. They questioned their leaders more. They thought more about the consequences of their actions. "The quantum temporal fractures created by Project Lazarus are healing," Morris continued. "Our scientists say that most of the damage to space-time will repair itself within another decade, but some scars will remain, just as the scars within our own hearts remain." After the speech, Linda walked away from the crowd. She found a quiet bench near a small pond and sat down. The sun was starting to set, painting the sky with orange and red. A young woman approached her. She had short brown hair and walked with a slight limp. Linda recognized her type of injury. It was common among survivors of the Kravek prison camps. "Excuse me," the woman said. "Are you Dr. Rogers, from Project Lazarus?" Linda tensed. Sometimes people who recognized her were angry. They blamed the scientists for the quarantine, for the fear other species now felt toward humans. "Yes, I am," she admitted. The woman sat down beside her. "My name is Nancy Ellis. I was on Proxima Colony when the Kravek attacked. They held me in a camp for 2 years." Linda didn't know what to say. "I'm sorry for what you went through." Nancy looked out at the pond. "They were studying us, trying to understand how our brains worked. They thought we were simple animals. Not worth talking to, just worth experimenting on." Linda stayed quiet. She had read the reports from the prison camps. They were horrible. "When Project Lazarus hit," Nancy continued, "I saw my guards suddenly stop. They looked confused, scared. They didn't know who they were anymore." She turned to look at Linda. "I know some people think what you did was wrong, but I wanted to say thank you. You saved what was left of us." After Nancy left, Linda remained, on the bench as darkness fell. Lights came on along the garden paths. A few people still walked among the memorials, paying their respects to the dead. Linda thought about what Nancy had said, and she thought about all the debates over Project Lazarus. Some called it self-defense, others called it genocide. Both were true, in their own way. The problem with weapons like Lazarus wasn't just what they did to the enemy. It was what they did to those who used them. Linda and her fellow scientists had crossed a line. They had built something that should not exist. Even if they had good reasons, that knowledge would always be with them. In the years since the war, Linda had dedicated herself to healing. She now worked on medical technology to help war survivors. Many others from Project Lazarus had made similar choices. They were trying to balance the scales in whatever small way they could. As she finally stood to leave the garden, Linda looked up at the night sky. The stars seemed colder than they used to. Before the war, she had looked up with wonder, imagining all the amazing species and civilizations out there among the stars. Now she knew that those same species looked toward Earth with fear. The quarantine would end eventually. The Galactic Council couldn't keep humanity confined forever. And when humans did return to the stars, what would they be? Would they be welcomed as friends, or feared as the species willing to break time itself to win a war? That was the true legacy of Project Lazarus. Not just victory, but a question that would follow humanity for generations. What are we capable of when pushed to the edge? Linda had no answer. No one did. All they could do was try to be better tomorrow than they had been yesterday. To remember what they had done, and to choose a different path forward. As she walked out of the memorial garden, Linda passed a small group of children. They were too young to really remember the war. They had grown up in the aftermath, in a solar system rebuilding itself. One day they would venture out to the stars. They would meet other species. They would represent humanity to the galaxy. Linda hoped they would do better than her generation had. She hoped they would find ways to survive without crossing the lines her team had crossed. But most of all, she hoped they would remember the monument in the garden, not as a celebration of power, but as a warning about the cost of using it. The stars waited above, cold and distant. The rest of the galaxy was out there, watching and wondering what humanity would do next. Linda didn't know the answer, but she knew they had to try to make it something better than what they had done before. That, in the end, was all anyone could do. Remember the past, learn from it, and try to build a better future one day at a time.